Ever wonder why John Wick's fighting style feels so different? It all goes back to Bruce Lee. Discover the hidden influence of the martial arts legend on modern action cinema and the revolutionary techniques that shaped the genre. Bruce Lee is universally recognized as the father of modern martial arts cinema, and his impact stretches far beyond the fight scenes he choreographed or the characters he played. His legacy runs through the DNA of action films, influencing actors, directors, choreography, and even the cultural perception of martial arts itself. Though his time in the cinematic spotlight was tragically short, the echoes of his work continue to shape modern action cinema in ways that are profound and enduring. Born in San Francisco and raised in Hong Kong, Bruce Lee embodied a unique fusion of East and West, a duality that informed both his personal philosophy and cinematic style. In an era when Asian actors were largely sidelined or reduced to stereotypes in Western films, Lee emerged as a powerful and charismatic lead, breaking down racial barriers and bringing authentic martial arts to global audiences. His confidence, physical prowess, and philosophy of self-expression resonated with a generation yearning for something new, something real. That realness became his cinematic signature and is a hallmark of action films to this day. Before Bruce Lee's arrival, fight scenes in films were typically stylized, slow-paced, and often unrealistic. Hollywood fight choreography lacked the visceral energy that Lee brought to the screen. He changed all of that with a style rooted in speed, efficiency, and visual impact. Films like The Big Boss, 1971, Fist of Fury, 1972, The Way of the Dragon, 1972, and especially Enter the Dragon, 1973, revolutionized action cinema by introducing fast, precise, and brutally effective fight sequences. These weren't just cinematic set pieces, they were expressions of a personal philosophy, Jeet Kune Do, Lee's martial art style that emphasized adaptability, fluidity, and directness. Jeet Kune Do was more than a martial art, it was a lens through which Lee viewed the world. Its principles aligned well with the evolving ethos of cinema: strip away the unnecessary, focus on the essence, and never be bound by tradition for tradition's sake. This attitude became deeply influential, especially in the 1980s and 1990s, when Western action films began adopting a grittier, more realistic aesthetic. Stars like Jackie Chan, Jet Li, Donnie Yen, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and even Hollywood titans like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger owed a debt to Lee's legacy, not necessarily by mimicking his moves, but by embracing his approach to action as something authentic and physically demanding. Jackie Chan, in particular, has spoken extensively about Bruce Lee's influence. Chan appeared briefly as a stuntman in Enter the Dragon, and though he would go on to develop a very different on-screen persona, blending comedy with martial arts, he credits Lee with showing the world that an Asian actor could lead an international film and captivate audiences with physical charisma. While Lee's characters were often stoic, driven, and intense, Chan carved his niche with vulnerability and humor. Still, both operated on the principle that action could be an art form in itself, a form of storytelling that transcended dialogue. Modern directors, too, have felt Bruce Lee's impact. Quentin Tarantino, the Wachowskis, the Russo brothers, and even Christopher Nolan have all crafted action scenes that owe something to the template Lee established. The Wachowskis, for example, consulted martial arts choreographer Yuen Woo-ping for The Matrix, a film whose fight scenes blend philosophy, realism, and aesthetics in a way reminiscent of Lee's own films. Neo's training sequence with Morpheus is essentially a modern reworking of Lee's ethos: don't think, feel. Tarantino's Kill Bill volumes are perhaps the most overt homage to Bruce Lee. Uma Thurman's yellow tracksuit is a direct reference to Lee's costume in Game of Death, and the structure of the fight scenes, choreographed, intimate, and emotionally charged, mirror Lee's approach to cinematic combat. Tarantino, a cinephile and student of film history, used Lee not merely as inspiration, but as a foundational reference point for how action could convey narrative, character, and mood all at once. Beyond style and choreography, Bruce Lee influenced how characters are written in action films. He introduced the concept of the warrior philosopher, a character who fights not for glory or revenge, but to uphold a personal code of honor and self-realization. This archetype persists in characters like Neo, John Wick, and even Batman. These are fighters with discipline, who train for mastery, and whose battles are internal as much as they are external. Lee's characters often grappled with themes of identity, justice, and self-control, concerns that gave depth to his films and have continued to inspire screenwriters crafting complex protagonists in today's action cinema. The diversity and global appeal of Bruce Lee's films also changed the landscape of international cinema. He proved that martial arts films could succeed outside Asia, breaking into Hollywood in a major way with Enter the Dragon, a co-production that brought Eastern fighting arts into the Western mainstream. That film's success laid the groundwork for the global martial arts boom in the 1980s and 1990s, with video stores and cable TV flooded with kung fu classics, many of which were directly inspired by or tried to mimic Lee's formula. Perhaps even more profoundly, Bruce Lee inspired a cultural shift in how martial arts were perceived. Before him, martial arts were often considered exotic, arcane, or purely athletic. He helped reframe them as a path to self-improvement, discipline, and personal freedom. His interviews, writings, and on-screen presence turned martial arts into a philosophical endeavor, something that resonated with both countercultural movements in the West and traditionalist values in the East. That dual appeal continues to be reflected in the way martial arts are portrayed in modern cinema, not merely as a means to defeat enemies, but as a metaphor for personal growth and harmony. The legacy of Bruce Lee also lives on through his representation of Asian identity. At a time when Hollywood often depicted Asian characters as submissive, comic, or villainous, Lee was strong, intelligent, and proud. He demanded respect not just through his fists, but through his integrity and intellect. He spoke openly about racism in Hollywood, about being denied leading roles despite his obvious talent, and about his dream of creating a space for Asian actors to shine. In this regard, his influence can be seen in the growing success of Asian-led action films and franchises, from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon to Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Even video games and animation reflect Bruce Lee's impact. Characters like Liu Kang from Mortal Kombat, Fei Long from Street Fighter, and countless others are modeled directly on his likeness and fighting style. His intense screams, sharp gestures, and iconic nunchaku use have been recreated across genres and formats. His influence extends into hip-hop, comic books, and fashion, proving that his presence in action cinema catalyzed a broader cultural phenomenon. Technology has also evolved to serve Bruce Lee's vision. With the rise of wirework, CGI, and motion capture, the physical artistry of martial arts has taken on new dimensions. Yet even as special effects dominate blockbuster action sequences, the best scenes still rely on the principles Lee espoused: clarity of movement, emotional engagement, and a narrative reason for every punch thrown. Directors like Gareth Evans, The Raid, Chad Stahelski, John Wick series, and Park Chan-wook, Old Boy, understand that the most effective fight scenes are not just about chaos and spectacle, but about storytelling through physical expression. In many ways, they are disciples of Bruce Lee's cinematic school, consciously or not. While Bruce Lee's filmography is relatively small, its impact is immense. His untimely death at 32 only amplified his mythos, freezing him in time as the eternal martial arts hero. But beyond the legend is a man who revolutionized the very grammar of action cinema. He replaced clumsy brawls with precision, turned stunt work into poetry, and made the body a vessel for both violence and virtue. His legacy is not just in the punches thrown or enemies defeated, but in the millions inspired to move, to train, to fight with purpose, and to see action cinema as an art form capable of depth, meaning, and transformation. In the end, Bruce Lee was more than a movie star. He was a visionary who reshaped an entire genre and whose philosophies continue to guide artists today. His influence on modern action cinema is not merely historical, it is present, active, and alive in every film where a character defies gravity with grace, where choreography becomes character development, and where fighting becomes a language of its own. Through the celluloid echoes of his voice, movements, and presence, Bruce Lee remains an enduring force, a master not only of martial arts, but of the cinema itself. Though Bruce Lee's physical presence left the world prematurely, his artistic and philosophical footprints are eternal. The foundation he laid continues to grow, branch out, and evolve across cultures, generations, and artistic mediums. The modern action genre owes not just its choreography but also its thematic depth and international diversity to Lee's pioneering work. He was a man who turned his body into an instrument of storytelling and used the silver screen as a canvas to paint an entirely new form of cinema. His influence is not confined to martial arts films, it echoes across Hollywood blockbusters, indie action thrillers, anime, television, sports, and even fashion. In many ways, Bruce Lee did not just influence modern action cinema, he gave it its soul. One of the most revolutionary aspects of Bruce Lee's contribution was his insistence on realism and emotional intensity in fight scenes. Before Lee, action was often staged with theatric distance, punches that didn't land, exaggerated responses, and scenes that served more as spectacle than substance. Bruce Lee changed the paradigm by making combat personal. His fights were not just clashes of fists and feet, they were dramatic expressions of character and purpose. You could see pain, fear, anger, and control in his body language. Whether confronting racists in Fist of Fury or facing Chuck Norris in The Way of the Dragon, Lee's fight scenes advanced the story and deepened the psychological dimensions of his characters. This approach influenced directors like Ridley Scott, James Cameron, and the Russo brothers, who began treating action not as filler but as narrative structure. Moreover, Bruce Lee's rejection of tradition for the sake of innovation directly influenced the way action choreography evolved. He believed that using no way as way and having no limitation as limitation was the essence of combat. That idea helped birth the hybridized style seen in contemporary cinema, films that merge kung fu with wrestling, parkour, gunplay, swordplay, and more. Today's action stars, from Keanu Reeves to Tom Cruise, train in multiple disciplines, reflecting Lee's belief that true mastery comes from adaptability and holistic development. The cross-training we see in films like The Matrix, The Raid, Atomic Blonde, and Extraction all reflect Lee's multidimensional vision of martial excellence. Additionally, Lee's legacy paved the way for cross-cultural storytelling. His movies often featured East-West fusion, not only in fight styles but in casting, setting, and themes. Enter the Dragon was a trailblazing co-production that introduced global audiences to a new kind of hero, Asian, multilingual, powerful, and philosophical. Today, such fusion is common. Franchises like Shang-Chi, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and The Last Samurai openly embrace this duality. What was once radical, an Asian hero commanding Western box offices, is now normalized, thanks in large part to Lee's ground-clearing work. It is also essential to examine the globalization of martial arts as an entertainment genre and lifestyle philosophy, another direct consequence of Bruce Lee's fame. After Enter the Dragon, there was an international explosion of interest in martial arts. Dojos opened across Europe, North America, and South America. Taekwondo, karate, and kung fu were not just foreign curiosities, they became mainstream pursuits. This cultural shift helped prepare audiences to accept martial arts in film not as exotic oddity but as a legitimate, beautiful, and inspiring art form. Bruce Lee didn't just put martial arts into movies, he put martial arts into everyday life. On a deeper level, Bruce Lee's writing and public interviews formed a philosophical backbone that elevated action heroes from caricatures to thinkers. Lee was not content with just showing off his physical abilities, he wanted to teach the world how to think. His beliefs in minimalism, directness, self-discipline, and self-knowledge deeply influenced the portrayal of heroism in modern films. Characters like Neo, The Matrix, Maximus, Gladiator, John Wick, and even Batman exhibit internal conflicts, moral codes, and mental discipline, qualities that mirror Lee's real-life philosophy. Directors and screenwriters increasingly began incorporating themes of spiritual balance, identity, and mental resilience into their narratives, particularly in action and martial arts-focused stories. Consider how characters today often wrestle with guilt, the burden of responsibility, and the need for inner peace. These are core tenets of Bruce Lee's worldview, expressed in his writing and through his physical performances. Kung Fu Panda, for example, is deeply rooted in Lee's values, albeit through an animated lens. Even children's media now reflects the deeper messaging Lee pioneered.